My name is Mike Shepard. I'm a producer. I want to get to know the artists in my new community. This is 1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists.
My name is Reid Cunningham. I'm a singer.
This week, I chat with Reid Cunningham. This is the final in the Quick on the Road series that I was doing because I happened to be in Kingston and I had a chance to connect with both Savannah and Reid, who had worked before on various theatrical productions. They both have a music background, and I felt this would be a great opportunity to reconnect. I am going to come back to the On the Road series every once in a while. Anytime I find myself traveling, as I do for work every once in a while, I want to connect with other artists outside of Ottawa, whether it be reconnecting like I've been with Reid and Savannah, or making new connections. So I'm really glad that I was able to have this opportunity to expand 1,000 Meals and talk to artists outside of Ottawa for a bit. But don't worry, I'll be back to more Ottawa artists starting next week. The conversation with Reid was really interesting for me because it was a really good opportunity for both of us to reflect and talk about our time together with the Juvenis Festival. So for those who don't know, the Juvenis Festival is Kingston's youth arts festival. When I founded it, it was one of the only 2 youth arts festivals that were multidisciplinary in all of Canada. I don't even know if there's another one running right now. I think this might be it. And that's multidisciplinary festivals. There are examples of other types of youth-led arts festivals, youth-led theater festivals, like there's one in Ottawa, there's one in Toronto, but this was multidisciplinary, a variety of art forms. I had hired Reid in the first year to be the festival producer to help navigate adding in music and other art forms into a company that at the time had solely done theater production. We sat down at Bella Bistro, which is this restaurant in Kingston that actually I'd never been to, which was nice. It was nice to connect somewhere that I'd never been before. But again, it was Reid's choice, his selection of venue. It's a very nice little restaurant, kind of on the more west end of Kingston, as almost as you're leaving Kingston and heading out to some of the rural communities. So it was really nice to meet and chat there. Our conversation does dive into a lot of different topics. Reid has a lot of thoughts on being a musician in Kingston and some of the struggles that come with finding venues and opportunities to perform. We also obviously do discuss Juvenis and Blue Canoe and some of our time there, what that meant to both of us, and seeing where it's going moving forward, which is really great. This was another episode that I did pretty light trimming to. For the most part, the conversation flowed well, and we discussed a few different things. Reid's a very interesting perspective for me because he's been on the cusp of really leaving his art in certain ways. He's not currently in a band. He's not currently performing. I'm not saying that he'll never do that again. I think music will always be part of his life. But it was really interesting to hear his perspective of looking back on some of the things he does and what he wants to do moving forward and why. And I think he was very clear and concise with that. So enjoy our conversation as we shared. I believe we each had sort of a sandwich kind of thing. I'm trying to remember what we ate. I recorded this a little while ago, but I believe we were enjoying some very delicious sandwiches together at the Bella Bistro in Kingston, Ontario.
How long have I known you, actually? That's even a...
10 years. 11 years. No. It's been longer than that. Oh my God, I'm so old. Singing for 15 years.
We met when you were still in high school, like your last year.
My grade 12 year.
Your grade 12 year of high school. And you were at least singing beyond then, because I saw you in a production of what was that musical?
Once Upon a Time. No.
The Princess and the Pea one, right?
No, but
What's it
Once
called?
Upon a Mattress.
Once Upon a Mattress. Yeah. Yes, you played the.
I was about to say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
You were not in that. No, you were not. Who would you have played in that? Marlon Manson? No, that's not his name. What's Marlon?
Not Marilyn Manson. That's the
That's the artist. This is off the rails. I can't use any of this.
No.
Okay, so you've been singing for over 10 years.
12 years.
12 years. Okay. And you have been in multiple bands that have performed live in Kingston at various locations.
Yeah.
What types of places did you sing at?
Blue Martini, The Mansion.
Which are like
Toucan.
Bars, pubs.
But
also performance venues.
I mean, that's the only place in Kingston that actually has a live music scene, unfortunately.
There are
other than downtown Kingston hosts events like the Blues Festival and Music in the Park. There are various events that happen in the streets of downtown Kingston, but in terms of accessibility for anyone that's under 19, it's kind of limited.
So bars, pubs are kind of what's there. That's what's available for you. If you have a young band and you're starting out, that's where you start.
Yes, and even when I was in high school, there was a lot of sketchiness to like when we would open for bands in bars.
Yeah.
We wouldn't. Technically, we were doing it was illegal for us to be in the bar when we were underage. All of us were underage.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a sketchy situation. But as I got older, obviously that became a lot easier. But we couldn't play to a large demographic because things would start at 10 o'clock at night and you'd have to be 19 plus. And even if you were 19 plus and you didn't feel safe in that environment of being in a bar around alcohol or drugs, it kind of limits a certain demographic in Kingston. And anybody, and I don't feel like that's just in Kingston. I feel like that's all around across Canada. Probably.
Well, one of the things that I'm noticing or finding when bands start out, there is some kind of, in a lot of communities, there's some kind of like progression forward where they can start in pubs and stuff, but then they can move up to performance venues type thing. Kingston doesn't really have venues that are available for up-and-coming musicians like performing.
No, I mean, the Grand Theatre does a thing where they have a residency.
Right.
That's
new, though.
That's new, but that's for recording purposes only. That's not for performance purposes.
There's no live performance.
There's no live performance.
It's interesting that you say that because the Grand Theatre, the Isabel Bader Center, other places I can drop like Leon Center, they certainly bring in those popular musical acts like touring and things from out of town. You don't often see local acts perform in those big venues.
No.
And I'm sure they would cite, well, we got to sell it.
Yeah.
And certain names will sell. But I would argue that if you've seen bands progress through Blue Martini and other bars like that, and you've seen them again and again, you would have some interest in seeing them in a bigger venue. And there are venues in between, in my opinion, in between a pub and a bar and the Isabel Bader Center. Like, I'm not saying jump right to that, but there aren't really in-betweens that seem to embrace live music.
Sure. I mean, the one thing you could say about the Isabel Bader Center, too, is that also kind of gives a bit sections off a certain demographic because a ticket to the Isabel Bader is pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And even the people trying to run events like that, as you know, costs thousands of dollars to be running an event at the Isabel Bader. And you're lucky if you're going to break even for that event, right? So
if you were a local person and wanted to put on a battle of the bands with young bands, renting the Isabel would not be available to you because of the price.
I mean, ideally, if it were accessible, that would be the best place to do it because that's probably, as it's been said many times, that's probably top 10 theaters in North America. But
gorgeous facility.
Gorgeous. But in terms of accessibility for socioeconomics, probably not, I think putting on, the more events that can happen, and it's hard because we live in Canada, so this can't happen outside all year round, but the more stuff that we can put outside that's accessible to the entire public is probably for the better, right?
Outside venues?
Yeah, outside venues, like when events happen. Thank you very much. Music in the square, music in the park, whatever. But are you saying that in terms of reaching someone's like a band's success, like how can that happen?
Everyone measures success differently.
Right.
So I guess I'm coming from my lens of success, which is if I was in a band, I'd want to start and maybe even for a year or two performing at every pub in town. But once I've done that circuit, I would want to know what's next.
Feels these days it's online. Everything's online, right?
Right.
Like getting your music out there is the only way. I mean, you can play every circuit in town in Kingston, and then you only will reach a certain point. You get to the bar circuits, then you get to the festivals, which is the McKinnon Brothers, the Blues Festival.
Which is, I guess, the next progression. I guess
Absolutely.
to be fair, that is a progression that artists have an option for in Kingston. There are festivals that will bring in new young artists.
100%. And they'll do that based off of their success and based off of what people are saying about them doing the bar circuit. If you want to get beyond Kingston, I mean, obviously there's the idea of, meeting up with certain bands in other areas, right? Like going to Ottawa, going to Toronto, going to, even if you can, access, going on a tour out west or going out east or something. Because you have to expand your audience. You can't just stay in Kingston or else, you're going to be playing to the same people over and over again.
And if I remember correctly, most of your bands, the reasons why you guys aren't still doing stuff more had to do with people moving on to different things.
Yeah, everyone moves on to their different projects,
not
right?
necessarily. You saw that trigger, you saw the opportunities, but people have to be willing to do it in order to do that.
I also played in bands where it was about 7 people or 10 people, right?
So you had big bands. Your bands were very big, and you touched upon a lot of different genres of music. And again, music is not my forte. Anyone who knows me knows that. But you had massive bands.
Absolutely.
For a single artist.
Because it's all about finding the people that have the same goals as you.
Right.
They're in the same place as you. And maybe not even want to get to a certain level, but creatively, everyone's on the same page. Because you could be having somebody that's inspired by doing certain R&B and soul covers and wanting to write music in that more of that capacity. And then all of a sudden, I had band members that wanted to do more psychedelic rock and more experimental jazz and stuff like that, where it's like, and that stuff's going to change all the time, of course. Like creatively to stay in the same place, that's very difficult. And I don't even really encourage it. Like I think it's as an artist, like you kind of have to explore it throughout time because it, keeps life exciting a little bit. Right?
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think we should talk about Juvenis because, I founded that festival in Kingston.
Yep.
It was a project of Blue Canoe, which is my theater company I ran for 11, 12 years. You and I worked on Juvenis for the first 3 years of its existence, the first 3 festivals. I hired you after randomly running into you, not knowing you were back in town.
That's right.
Yeah, I was walking home from the Tet Center, which for people who don't know is an art center in Kingston, and we ran into each other. And you were like,
"That's right.
Yeah, I'm back in town and looking for work." And
that's right.
Yeah.
And then you brought me into the Theater Kingston office.
Yeah.
And during our conversation, we were talking about running the festival, but Blue Canoe was never mentioned. So I just automatically thought that I was about to work for Theater Kingston. And I didn't realize when I started working that it was Blue Canoe that was working at Theater Kingston.
I didn't know that.
I was still down.
Yeah, at the time, because I never made money as work for Blue Canoe. I was working for Theater Kingston at the time.
Right.
But I'd love to hear some thoughts on Juvenis and our time there, and even looking back on the first year and second year and third year and what your role was. I think that'd be kind of interesting to talk about. Because you say you're a singer, which is true. Like that's your art.
Yep.
But you were the festival producer for 3 years, which means managing, running events, including our Battle of the Bands, which I want to talk about. Because I feel like that Battle of Bands was our attempt to give more opportunities to young bands.
Absolutely. Well, and it took Blue Canoe away from just being a theater company. I mean, Juvenis in general, right?
Yeah.
Blue Canoe was a youth theater company, which was always known for youth theater, and it always stuck to youth theater, whereas Juvenis kind of allowed us and other people to build connections and draw opportunity for more arts disciplines, whether that's poetry, whether that's dance, whether that's music, whether that's... And again, what that also did is that we tried to create also other meetings and events and get-togethers where all those people from these different disciplines would come together and they would collaborate. and they would come up with different ideas, which is really important because, as I was saying, like you can't really just stick with one thing in your artistic endeavors. You kind of have to branch out a little bit. You have to explore different things in order to find inspiration for maybe the one thing that you really want to hone in on.
It's a really good point that you're bringing up, and it's so interesting how you say that. Only now when you say that am I thinking, yeah, that's exactly what Juvenis was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad, not sad, it's just a shame that it took Blue Canoe and me 8 years, because I was 8 years into Blue Canoe's existence when we finally did this, to realize. Now, I think Blue Canoe, we had done a storytelling coffee house for a couple of years.
Right.
That was got into poetry and other sort of art forms as a part of that. And Blue Canoe almost exclusively produced musicals, which always brings in music and dance as a part of it. So I think it was a more natural shift than it may have seemed to go to all disciplines.
Right.
But it is an interesting point I think certainly I can look at it and say, I'm a better producer now because I did that and saw the perspective of other artists.
Sure, and I think for myself, like, you hired me with no administration experience whatsoever,
Yeah, but that wasn't important.
Well, yeah, sure, and especially for a startup, which I guess you could say that we were. Of running festivals is that I kind of got a crash course in the whole idea of being an administrator, and it kind of built a muscle in itself, and how important all that is to create opportunity for artists, and how much of an art in itself administration is, right?
I think administration has an art to it. Everything does. Everything in your life has an art.
Sure,
but when I hired you because you're good with people. You had a background in an art discipline that I didn't, which is important. And I think when you're filling a team, you make a big mistake if you don't fill your team with people who think differently than you and have different experiences than you. I think that's a mistake if you do that.
100%.
So by doing that, I'm avoiding the mistake of everyone thinks like me or everyone has the same experiences as me.
Yes.
So hiring you was, he's going to think differently. Regardless of your administrative experience, you can learn how to write emails and do budgets and contact people and organize stuff. You can learn that. It's a skill.
Absolutely.
But I don't think it's as easy to learn the personal touches that you have with people.
No. I remember, so I used to volunteer with the hospital. I used to sit on interview panels for people that were going to high up administrative positions in the hospital, whether that was through the mental health department or various other departments. And I remember the guy that used to lead the panel would always say, I can work on the skills that is, doing the books, running all the administration, doing all these files that we do. All that stuff is easy to me. I can't teach somebody that is personable and cares. I can't teach that skill. That has to come from within, right? So I think you're right. Everyone does has the capability to organize themselves and to organize something and to put something together. And everyone has a different process to how you organize that. But in terms of actually giving a shit, about other people and other artists, that's it's either you got it or you don't.
Yeah, and making you the festival producer and you doing administrative stuff was a byproduct of the festival manager I'd hired was leaving, and I knew this when I hired her, was leaving for Europe for a vacation that summer.
Right.
So the first festival year, I knew I'd have her to a certain point, and then she would be gone for several months. And then, again, with her, I thought, well, I'm playing the long game here for the next couple of years. It's worth hiring her because whatever. So Reid can come in and fill in to get the year one off the ground.
Absolutely.
So the administrative stuff to me also was, well, he's not going to always do that anyway.
No.
There's support for you.
Yeah, right.
And I had hired you thinking, I want to do a battle of the bands. I think it's fun. I think it's fun for arts to compete. I don't think arts is a competitive thing. I don't think having competitive attitudes is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's fun, in a fun way, to have a competition and have people vote on it.
Right.
But, the bands get to be in it. They get to be there. They get to perform for a big crowd. A relatively big venue. We tried to get bigger venues we can get.
Sure.
And it's a fun, exciting atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one thing I remember I remember organizing the thing, and like, you always say battle the bands. Obviously, we had a prize. There's a competition. There's judges. Like
Judges.
you're getting critiqued.
Celebrity judges.
Yeah, celebrity judges we had. But you are in a sense that it is a competition. So a lot of people can see that as well. That could really divide people.
It could.
But it actually, I actually think competition brings people together.
I think
in a sense of
I
community.
agree.
Because I remember when the event was done and the judges were deciding, we were looking down on the balcony on all the bands. And all the bands that were there were on the stage talking, connecting, being like, complimenting each other and be like, oh, you guys did this, blah, blah, blah. In a sense, it's proof of that competition actually brings people together in community. Even though that there is a sense of, hey, we want to win.
Yeah.
We also want to, support each other.
Yep.
Right?
Well, I think you make a good point. Like anything else in the world, there's a healthy competition and there's an unhealthy competition.
Absolutely.
And we focus on the unhealthy a lot.
For sure.
You're describing an example of healthy competition, not competing between, this happened a lot with Blue Canoes. Other theater companies would be like, oh, don't go see a Blue Canoe show. You got to come see ours. That's competition.
Yeah, right.
That's not, and I was never like, I never
made any sense.
Honestly, I never cared what anyone else was doing. But Battle of Bands was exactly that. It's a fun thing. It's a term that is to have fun and to have an endearing time. It's not meant to divide.
Yeah, well, because if you silo yourself, you're only going to go to a certain point. Whereas if you build an alliance, you build community, you're only going to raise the profile, not only yourself, but other people. And why not make it a win-win? Because if you don't, it's just lose. Someone's going to win, and you're probably going to lose. If you're going to silo yourself and be competitive and be nasty and be jealous.
And I think that's a trap for artists. Competitiveness, nastiness, jealousy. It's okay if other people have good things. It's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for the industry, and I always believed this. When I was running a theater company, that there were 6 other theater companies. I thought that was good. The more people who go see theater, the better. The more people who engage in theater. Because theater being acting or singing or dancing, it's a muscle like anything else. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it.
Right.
So I always thought, well, this is good. Everyone I want to work with will go work on these things. They'll become better. Then they'll come back work with me and be even better. And then they'll leave and be even better for the next project.
Absolutely.
It's good. The more we have, the better.
Absolutely. Well, I even think, I remember going away to that summer internship in Toronto. Just doing that gave me a nice, refreshing lens coming back into working with Blue Canoe, into, hey, how can we do things a little bit differently? And how can we build, different philosophies that I had to, like, how do we come and approach our work?
You worked on basically a trilogy of Juvenis Festival. And like any good trilogy,
what a saga.
And any good trilogy, the second one is always the best.
Yeah. Yeah, it really was.
And the second festival year was, I would say, pretty much incredible. I will always remember year 2. Now, year 1 I have a lot of fond memories, and it's the first year you're learning things. But year 2,
year 1 it was a gong show, but it's definitely the most memorable in a way, because it's like, in a way, like once the week started, we had so much fun. There was a lot of stress leading up to it, because it was sort of like, this is really unknown. A lot of stuff was going on. And again, I was learning. Everyone else the whole thing was so fresh. So there was a lot of anxiety built around how this was going to go. And the minute it started, it was one of the most memorable weeks of my life, because it was just going around and seeing how it just sometimes, like, when you're the administrator, or when you're a president or producer or whatever, it can feel like you have all the weight on your shoulders when something is running. But when you're building something where community is coming together, you always have to trust in the fact that everyone's going to know what they're doing. Put things in the right place for a reason, because they can handle their shit.
And you had a lot on your plate, though. Like, to also be fair, it's hard for you to enjoy it, because not only did you work so hard to the week of, during the week, you would have to be at the art gallery that was open to the public, basically from 9 to 5. There were workshops after school for youth up until show times, and then there were shows in the evening. 7, 8, 9 o'clock. There were theater shows, dance shows, music shows. So you not only were prepping things, you were present and had to be present at most of the events, if not all, like a good chunk of them, especially in that first year.
Yeah.
But even every year subsequent, you were involved and had to be at events. So it's tiring, it's time consuming, it's a lot.
Absolutely, but it's energy and it's fun. Once you're there, I think we spread out the work a little bit more. We were really good with that, and we kind of learned from year one. We're saying, hey, where's everyone's strengths and weaknesses? How can we hone in on that? And sure, not to say that there weren't frustrating times,
Of course, but it was still good.
but it was. I think everything was put into place, and probably running the best festival that we'd ever done.
It's also kind of incredible that here we are in 2023, a festival we started in 2016.
No,
17 was the first year. I think we were planning on
2016 was the first year.
Okay, 16 was the first year. Is still around in 2023 without us,
absolutely.
Which I think is a credit to the people who ran it from there. Like that's hard to do.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Leaving Blue Canoe for me was really tough because I felt that if I didn't disconnect 100%, that I would do too much free work for them, which I was doing free work anyway, but I was trying to move on, and I would be continuing to coddle a board that was being coddled by me for you. So I had to disconnect to say to the board, you hire who you want, you do what you want, you know what the budget is, you know what the resources are, you just do it. So that created a bit of a tension in the atmosphere because people felt like I bailed on Blue Canoe. But that's not the case. Blue Canoe is something that was precious to me for a long time. I put a lot of time and effort in, and it was time for it to grow up. So yes, I had to shove it out the door a little bit, but
sure. No, I totally know what you mean. And I think the biggest point out of all of that is to see that it is still running, and no matter what it is, it still leaves a legacy.
For sure.
For sure. The amount of time that it is, the tenure that it is probably the most important thing. Right?
And just take more credit for what you contributed to that, because that's 3 years that you were the festival producer. You really laid the foundations.
Yeah, okay. I'll take it. I'll take the compliment.
I'll take it. I will take it. What's I know the future is hard to know.
Always.
For sure. But are the arts always going to be a part of what you do? Do you feel like you want to move on and do other things? Like, where are you with your art?
No, I feel like I want to move on and do other things. I mean, I think for me, the reason why I don't do it as much anymore, I think artistically, especially singing in bands, it was a bit of more of a, I don't want to say narcissistic. I feel like that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. But just more of a, I don't want to say narcissistic because
it was personal for you.
I think it came from a more place of, it was for me. It was self-indulged, I guess you could say.
Okay.
And that I felt like I needed to get to a certain place, that I needed to prove something to somebody, to prove to people that I am worth something, I am worth this, but I don't know, and the pandemic has really changed that for me, where it's like I've kind of come back and said, man, there's a lot more important things that are going on in the world right now that I need to explore, and I feel like I want to help out with. So I'd like to kind of work in, I don't want to say social work because none of the work I've been doing is like social work,
sure.
But in a way I'd like to move towards something like that, where at least I work in a capacity where I'm helping and that I'm assisting others. Yeah. So, and artistically, I'd like to step into something like that. I think doing administration stuff could be a benefit of that, even though, that has its challenges, trying to put that together. But I think in a way, artistically, I'd like to be doing something more of that. And I think it's hard. I think, honestly, like in a city like Kingston, as much as there is community, there are people that do care. I don't want to put a blanket statement, but I do think there's a whole lot of people that are in it for themselves.
Right.
Which is a hard world for me to really dive back into. You know what I mean?
I think that's fair, and I think it's understandable that you feel this need to do something a little different.
Yeah.
Feel like you're contributing in a different way. And like you just said, I think your point about art could be a part of that is very true. Like, art could be a therapeutic, supportive thing for others.
Totally.
So that might be something that you can bring to the table one day.
Right.
1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists is a project of Soul One Arts Inc. Produced and edited by me, Mike Shepard. Original music by Savannah Shea. Thank you to this week's artists and to the local restaurants who host us. For more on 1,000 Meals with 1,000 Artists and Soul One, please visit soulonearts.ca. If you're an artist, feel free to reach out to us on our website and connect for your own Thank you for listening.